She had never thought much about music, at least not in a serious way. To her, it was just sounds, something that played in the background of her life while she focused on school, work, or chatting with friends. She enjoyed it, sure, but she had never imagined herself sitting in front of a piano and playing anything beyond simple tunes. She had picked up from YouTube or small lessons at school years ago. Today, however, everything felt different. Though she did not realize it yet, the sun was shining softly through the trees as she walked down the busy street, the kind of street that always seemed alive with movement. People hurried past, talking on phones, sipping coffee, or laughing with friends. Street performers played music, vendors sold snacks and trinkets, and somewhere ahead she noticed a small crowd gathered. Her curiosity pulled her closer. There was a piano placed in the middle of the open space, unusual and out of place, almost like it had been dropped from another world. It was shiny and black, reflecting the sunlight, and a few people were already pressing keys, laughing at the random sounds they were making. She smiled to herself, thinking it looked fun. She had always loved games, little playful things that could break the monotony of a regular day. This seemed just like that, a game for anyone willing to join. She stepped closer, feeling the warm breeze on her face, and watched the others for a moment. Some were laughing at their mistakes. Others seemed to know just a little about the piano, hitting keys that almost sounded like songs. It was chaotic, messy, and yet strangely inviting. Without much thought, she walked up to the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. She had no plan, no real idea of what she would play. But the simple act of touching the keys made her feel alive in a way she had not felt for a long time. Her hands moved naturally, pressing keys almost randomly at first. The sound was clumsy but playful, like a bird learning to sing its first song. She laughed softly, enjoying the silly little noises she created. It was a game, and she was in the middle of it, fully immersed. People around her noticed, some encouraging, others just passing by, glancing for a moment before moving on. A few kids stopped to watch, their eyes wide with curiosity. She felt a spark of pride, even though she told herself it was silly to feel that way. The piano responded to her touch, even if only in small ways, and she felt a connection she could not explain. It was as if the piano understood her. Even though she barely knew how to understand it herself, she pressed a few keys more deliberately. Experimenting with patterns she remembered from childhood songs, little tunes she had picked up here and there. To her surprise, it sounded recognizable, like a melody that belonged to her in some secret way. She had not realized that her hands moved with a rhythm that was natural to her, something she had never consciously practiced. It was not perfect, far from it, but it had a charm, a sincerity that made the small audience around her pause. People whispered to each other, pointing at her fingers moving across the keys. She noticed this and felt a little nervous. She laughed and said softly, almost to herself, "I'm just playing around." She hoped it would sound harmless, just like a game, but something shifted in the air. Among the crowd, she sensed someone watching her more closely than the rest. She could not see him clearly, but there was a presence that felt different. She shrugged and told herself it was just her imagination. After all, she was in the middle of a public place with hundreds of people moving around. There was no reason for anyone to notice her in particular. Still, she felt a subtle pressure, like someone was quietly waiting to see what she would do next. That thought made her fingers move faster, more excitedly, like a challenge she had to meet. She began to play with more confidence, allowing her imagination to guide her hands. Notes clumsily formed into small phrases, phrases into small sections, and soon she was lost in the music entirely. The sound felt like it had its own life, weaving around the chatter of the crowd, blending with the distant sounds of traffic, laughter, and footsteps. Time seemed to slow down as she played. The world around her melted into background noise, and the piano became her entire universe for those moments. She felt free, unburdened, and strangely brave. A little girl in the front of the crowd clapped softly, eyes wide, and that small gesture made her smile. Encouragement, even from a stranger, carried weight she had never expected. She played a few more notes, experimenting with combinations she had never tried before. Each sound seemed to open a door inside her mind, unlocking ideas and feelings she had buried under routine and everyday life. She realized she had been missing this kind of expression, this way of letting something pure and unfiltered escape from her hands. It felt almost like magic, and she had stumbled upon it by accident. Thinking it was just a game, minutes passed without her noticing. The crowd had grown slightly, some people stopping just to watch her experiment, their expressions ranging from amusement to genuine curiosity. She noticed their faces occasionally, offering smiles and small nods, but she was mostly unaware of them. She was focused entirely on the piano, the keys, the sounds, and the strange thrill of creating something, anything, from nothing. Her fingers moved more confidently now, forming small arcs of melody that sounded almost intentional. She could not explain how she knew what to press next, only that it felt right in the moment. Occasionally, she made mistakes, wrong notes, clumsy transitions, but she did not care. Mistakes were part of the game. Each sound, correct or incorrect, contributed to the playful rhythm she had created. She laughed at herself when she hit a particularly sour note, and the crowd laughed with her. There was no shame, only shared amusement. The piano was forgiving, her audience gentle, and she felt safe. Like the world had paused to let her have this small adventure, somewhere in the midst of it all. She began to notice patterns forming, tiny sequences of notes that made sense together. She experimented with variations, pressing different combinations, letting her intuition guide her. The small melodies surprised her, as if she had unlocked something she did not know she had. Her heart raced a little at the realization. Maybe, she thought, this was more than just a game. Maybe she had a talent she had never discovered, a hidden ability that the playful experiment had revealed. She shook her head, laughing softly at the thought. It was silly, she told herself, just a random discovery in a random moment. A few adults in the crowd started whispering, exchanging glances. She noticed that too, but did not stop. She was curious, but more than that, she was caught in the sheer joy of creating something in the moment. Every key she pressed was a choice, a small story unfolding. She did not know it, but the piano had become a mirror, reflecting her creativity, her courage, and her willingness to step into the unknown. Even if only for fun, her hands moved faster now, more confidently, as if they had a mind of their own. The sound filled the space, not overpowering, but noticeable. It made people pause, made some smile, made a few stop in their tracks. She felt a thrill she had never felt before, the kind that comes from realizing that something small can make a big impact. It was the kind of thrill that stays with you, even after the moment is gone. And then she noticed the man who had been standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. He was older, with calm eyes that seemed to see everything. He did not speak, did not clap, did not even smile yet. But there was something in the way he watched that made her fingers hesitate for a moment. She felt a little nervous, but she also felt excited. Who was he? Why was he watching so closely? It was strange and a little thrilling. She had thought this was just a game, a harmless way to pass time. But suddenly, it felt like there was more at stake. Even if she did not fully understand it, she shrugged and returned to the keys, letting her fingers dance lightly. The music became a conversation, a playful exchange between her hands and the piano. With the crowd serving as a silent audience, every note was a question, every sequence an answer. She had never played like this before, not with such freedom, not with such joy. It felt natural, effortless, and completely new. The sunlight shifted as the day moved forward, casting shadows across the keys and highlighting the movement of her fingers. She barely noticed the passing time. The world existed only in the music, in the small game she had started for fun. She laughed softly again, enjoying the sound, enjoying the way the piano responded, and enjoying the tiny, growing connection with the people around her, even if she did not know them. It was a shared moment, simple yet profound. Little did she know, that quiet man watching her, noticing every detail, would change the meaning of this playful afternoon forever. She thought it was just a game, a fleeting amusement, a small escape from the everyday. But in reality, it was the first step into a journey she had never imagined. A journey that would teach her more than she had ever learned from books, lessons, or casual practice. This simple game had already begun to open doors she had not even known existed. She did not realize it at first. But more people had started gathering around the piano. Some were curious onlookers, intrigued by the small melodies spilling into the open space. Others were just wandering passers-by, slowing down because the sound drew them in. There was a soft hum of conversation, but the music stood out like a thread weaving through it all. She felt the attention a little heavier than before, but it did not scare her. It felt exciting, like she had stepped into a place where something unexpected could happen. Her hands moved over the keys naturally. The playful energy from before, transforming into something a little more thoughtful. She experimented, pressing sequences she had never thought to try before. Each small melody felt like a question, a tiny exploration of what she could do with her hands and imagination. She noticed the children at the front of the crowd, their eyes wide and shining with curiosity. Their fascination made her smile, a warmth spreading through her chest. She realized that even simple notes, unpolished and clumsy, could bring joy to someone else. She glanced briefly at the quiet man who had been watching her from the edge of the crowd. He had not moved, not smiled, not made a sound, yet she could feel the weight of his attention. There was something different about him, something that made the air feel thicker, the sounds of the piano richer. She wondered who he was, what he thought of her playing, but she did not stop. Instead, she let the curiosity push her forward. Pressing keys with more confidence and letting her instincts guide her, the melodies she played were simple. Not the kind that would be performed on stage, but there was a certain honesty in them, a sincerity that came from doing something purely for the joy of it. She laughed when a few notes clashed unexpectedly, enjoying the imperfections that made the music her own. The crowd responded subtly, some nodding in approval, others smiling quietly. The piano was no longer just a toy. It had become a way to communicate, to reach out beyond herself and touch the people around her in a tiny, unexpected way. Her fingers stumbled occasionally, but she adapted quickly. Every mistake felt like a lesson, a small hint about what worked and what did not. She felt the music guiding her hands, almost like it had a life of its own, leading her toward combinations she had never imagined. Each note was a choice, each sequence a conversation. She was learning in real time, not from books or lessons, but from the music itself and the way it responded to her touch. The crowd was growing more attentive. People began to pause longer, drawn by the surprising beauty of what had started as playful experimentation. A few whispered to each other, pointing subtly, but never interrupting. Their presence gave her a strange confidence, an understanding that even in the simplest act of pressing keys, she had the power to make someone feel something. It was a gentle awakening, a realization that her hands could create more than just sound. They could create a connection. She began to notice the patterns she had instinctively created. Small sequences of notes repeated, variations emerged naturally, and the melody started to flow more smoothly. She smiled at herself, amazed at what was coming from her own fingers. She had never trained extensively, never thought seriously about music, and yet here she was, creating something that sounded intentional. It was a revelation, a moment of clarity that made her heart race. The quiet man at the edge of the crowd finally stepped closer. She noticed, and a flicker of nervousness passed through her. She had thought this was just a playful afternoon, a game, but his presence made it feel different. He was watching her with an intensity that made her pause briefly. For a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake, if she should stop. But then, she felt the music calling her back, the same thrill that had kept her playing before. She decided to continue, letting the notes flow even as her mind tried to guess his thoughts. Her hands became more fluid, her movements more confident. The music seemed to have a rhythm of its own, pulling her into a state where she was both aware and unaware, fully present yet lost in the sound. The crowd watched silently, some leaning in slightly, captivated by the transformation unfolding before them. She laughed softly to herself, realizing that she had entered a space where time felt different. A place where music had its own rules, and she was free to explore them. A young boy in the front clapped softly, breaking the quiet admiration of the crowd. She smiled at him, a genuine smile that conveyed encouragement and warmth. That simple gesture made her feel connected, reminded her that music was not just about notes but about emotion, about reaching others in a way words often could not. She felt a sense of responsibility, even if it was light, to keep going. To explore what she could do with the piano and the moment she had been given, the quiet man finally approached. Stepping closer with slow, deliberate movements, she noticed him now clearly, an older man with kind eyes and a calm presence. He did not speak immediately, just observed, letting her play as if waiting for something. She felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. Who was he? Why was he here? His presence was commanding yet gentle, and it made her realize that perhaps her game was more serious than she had thought. She played a little more deliberately, testing combinations, experimenting with small melodies that felt complete to her. Her instincts guided her, but she also felt the subtle influence of his attention, as if the music was being shaped not only by her hands, but by the quiet encouragement in the air. The keys seemed to respond to her emotions, her curiosity, and her growing confidence. It was a dynamic, living conversation, and she was learning with every note. The crowd around them had grown, but it felt intimate. People leaned in slightly, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of sound and emotion unfolding. The laughter from before had quieted into soft smiles and whispers, a silent recognition that something special was happening. She realized that music could change the atmosphere, could create a shared experience, even among strangers. She felt honored to be the one making it happen, even if only for a fleeting moment. The older man finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. He asked simple questions, gentle enough not to startle her. "Have you played much before?" he asked. She shook her head, surprised that he would take an interest. "Not really," she said softly. "I just play sometimes for fun." His eyes did not judge her, only observed. He seemed genuinely curious, as if he was searching for something deeper beneath her casual words. She realized that he was not there to critique her, but to understand. To see the music she created naturally. Her fingers hovered above the keys again, as she played a small sequence, almost instinctively. He nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that she was onto something. She felt a rush of pride and excitement, but it was mixed with a little fear. She had never experienced attention like this. Never had someone notice her in such a focused, meaningful way. And yet, the thrill of it pushed her forward, made her want to play more, to show what she could do. Time seemed to blur. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. She continued experimenting, creating small melodies that twisted and turned in ways she had never imagined. The crowd remained silent, but engaged, sensing the magic in the moment. Children watched with wide eyes, adults nodded quietly, and she felt a strange but comforting sense of community. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge between her and everyone around her, connecting them through sound, emotion, and presence. Her confidence grew with each note. She noticed the patterns she created, the small sequences that sounded harmonious. She smiled at herself, realizing that even in a casual game she had found something powerful. Her hands moved with increasing fluidity, no longer clumsy, but precise enough to carry a sense of intention. The music was hers. Yet it belonged to the moment, to the crowd, and to the quiet observer who had quietly become part of her experience. She laughed softly when a few notes clashed, embracing the imperfections as part of the beauty. The man finally smiled, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it felt monumental. She understood then that she was not alone in her discovery, that someone recognized the spark she had barely noticed herself. It was an unspoken acknowledgement, a validation that made her heart race with excitement. As she played, she felt a growing sense of purpose. What had started as a playful experiment had become something more. She realized that music was not just about skill, but about presence, emotion, and connection. Each key she pressed carried a weight she had not understood before, a small but significant power to affect those around her. And in that realization, she felt both humbled and exhilarated. Ready for whatever came next in this unexpected encounter that had started as a simple game? The quiet man stepped closer, and for the first time, she could see him clearly. He was older, with a calm presence and eyes that seemed to understand more than anyone else in the crowd. He wore simple clothes, unassuming, but there was a certain grace about him, a way he moved that suggested experience and knowledge. She felt a flutter of nerves, but it was not fear. It was curiosity, a sense that something important was about to happen. He watched her play for a moment longer before speaking in a soft, steady voice. "You have a gift," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. She paused, unsure how to respond. She had been playing for fun, thinking it was a game, a lighthearted experiment, and now someone was telling her she had a gift. Her heart raced, and a mix of excitement and disbelief swept through her. A gift. She asked quietly, unsure if she should take his words seriously.
Yes,
he said, nodding slightly. "You play with honesty. Your fingers may not be perfect, but your music carries feeling. That is rare. That is what matters most." He smiled gently, not in a way that pressured her, but in a way that felt encouraging. She felt her cheeks warm. She had never imagined anyone would notice her like this, especially not someone so composed and experienced. She continued playing, a little more deliberately this time, trying to understand what he meant. The notes felt different now, more intentional. She noticed small shifts in how she pressed the keys, listening closely to the sound each note made. The man watched silently, nodding occasionally, and she felt a strange connection forming. It was as if the piano and the moment had united them in a shared understanding that went beyond words. The crowd sensed the change, too. People who had been casually observing now leaned in slightly, curious about the interaction. There was a quiet energy in the air, a feeling that something significant was unfolding. The children at the front watched her with wide eyes, sensing the seriousness of the moment, while adults murmured softly, recognizing a rare and beautiful scene. The piano, once just a game, had become a focal point of human connection. The man spoke again, this time asking about her background. She admitted she had never studied seriously, that she only played casually, and sometimes followed online tutorials. He listened carefully, asking questions not to judge, but to understand. Every word he spoke carried thoughtfulness, a calm curiosity that made her feel safe despite the unusual attention. She realized that he was not just watching her. He was observing her potential, seeing something she had barely acknowledged herself. He then made a suggestion, gentle but deliberate. "Try this," he said, moving his hands over the keys and demonstrating a simple sequence. She watched carefully, noticing how his fingers moved effortlessly, creating a melody that was soft, expressive, and full of feeling. She tried to follow her own fingers imitating his movements, and felt a small spark of discovery. The sequence was not complex, but it had depth, a way of shaping sound that she had never considered before. Her own playing began to change subtly. She listened more closely, adjusted her touch, and experimented with timing. The notes started to flow differently, forming patterns that sounded intentional and expressive. The man watched silently, occasionally offering a nod of approval, and she felt a thrill of recognition. She had been playing for fun, treating it like a game, but now she realized that music could be so much more. It was a living, breathing language, capable of conveying emotions words could not capture. He encouraged her to explore variations, to play what she felt rather than what she thought she should play. She hesitated at first, uncertain if her instincts were good enough. But as she let go of self-doubt, the music transformed. Small melodies became more fluid, transitions smoother, and even mistakes felt like part of the beauty. The man smiled subtly, clearly appreciating her willingness to experiment. She felt a sense of pride, but it was mixed with humility, a recognition that there was so much to learn. Minutes passed like hours. She had never been so focused, so absorbed in something that demanded her full attention, yet allowed her freedom. The crowd remained quietly attentive, sensing the magic in the moment. Children clapped softly, adults nodded, and a few whispered words of encouragement. She realized that music was no longer just a personal game. It had become a shared experience, a bridge connecting her to strangers in an unexpected way. The piano had transformed into more than an instrument. It was a tool of connection and expression. The man guided her gently, offering small tips on hand, positioning and timing, not to correct her mistakes, but to enhance the natural expression she already possessed. Each suggestion was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it made a noticeable difference in the sound. She felt the music becoming richer, deeper, more resonant. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing layers of potential she had not known existed. She played with renewed confidence, letting the notes flow freely, each one carrying emotion and intention. He shared stories of music and life, anecdotes about famous performances, and moments of discovery. She listened intently, absorbing not just the technical guidance, but the wisdom behind it. She realized that music was about more than skill. It was about presence, awareness, and emotion. Each key pressed was a choice, each sequence an expression of thought and feeling. The lessons were subtle but profound, and she felt privileged to witness them firsthand. The crowd watched, captivated by the unfolding lesson. The energy shifted from casual amusement to quiet awe. They could feel the connection between teacher and student, even if they did not understand the technical aspects. There was a silent acknowledgement among them that something rare was happening. Children leaned closer, inspired, while adults smiled knowingly, recognizing the beauty of an unexpected human encounter. The piano had become a conduit for shared wonder. She experimented with dynamics, playing softly and then louder, observing the impact of each note on the atmosphere. The man encouraged her to listen, not just to the notes she played, but to the silence between them, the spaces where emotion could breathe. She learned to shape the music with subtlety, to let her feelings guide her hands rather than her mind. The melodies began to flow naturally, expressing a depth she had never imagined possible. The piano had become a mirror, reflecting not just skill, but emotion, courage, and curiosity. As the lesson continued, she realized that what she had thought was a simple game had become a turning point. The casual play had unlocked something profound within her, something that required nurturing and dedication. She felt a growing sense of purpose, a desire to continue exploring, learning, and creating. The man noticed the change, nodding slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of her potential and determination. She felt encouraged, inspired, and motivated in ways she had never experienced before. The sun began to shift in the sky, casting long shadows across the piano keys. She was aware of time passing, but it felt inconsequential. The moment was alive, vibrant, and transformative. She had discovered a new layer of herself, a hidden talent that she had treated casually until now. The man's presence had elevated the experience, turning play into discovery, curiosity into guidance, and spontaneity into meaningful expression. Finally, he spoke again, suggesting a small composition to try together. She followed, her fingers moving in sync with his, creating a melody that was richer and more expressive than anything she had played before. The crowd listened in silence, witnessing the transformation from casual experimentation to guided mastery. Each note carried meaning, and she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and wonder. The game had ended, but a new chapter had begun. One that promised growth, learning, and endless possibilities. She looked at the man with gratitude and awe. He had not just observed her playing. He had recognized potential, nurtured curiosity, and guided her toward something she could not have discovered alone. The simple afternoon that had begun as a game had become an unforgettable encounter. A first step into a world of music, connection, and self-discovery. She realized that this was only the beginning, that the journey ahead was vast, exciting, and full of promise. And in that realization, she felt a quiet thrill, a sense that her life had shifted in ways she would carry forever. She had never felt anything quite like the moment she sat beside the older man at the piano. It was one thing to play on her own, to explore melodies in a playful way. It was another to have someone so experienced guiding her. Not in a way that forced her, but in a way that encouraged her natural expression. His hands moved with ease, demonstrating techniques and subtle touches she had never thought of, while his eyes never left hers, watching closely and gently steering her through each note. She tried to mimic the sequences he showed her, struggling at first, unsure of how to balance precision with expression. He smiled softly, never criticizing, only adjusting a finger here, a hand position there. The way he guided her was unlike any lesson she had ever imagined. There were no strict rules, no harsh corrections. Every suggestion was an invitation to explore deeper, to discover something new about the music and herself. She realized that music was more than notes and rhythm. It was emotion. It was presence. It was the energy she brought to each key. She began to feel the subtle differences between each note. The resonance, the way sound lingered in the air. He encouraged her to listen, not just to the melody, but to the spaces between notes, the pauses that carried their own meaning. She experimented with tempo and dynamics, learning how to emphasize some notes, soften others, and create tension and release in a way that told a story. Each small improvement filled her with excitement, and each challenge made her focus sharper. The crowd had not left. In fact, they seemed even more attentive now, as if sensing the gravity of the lesson unfolding. People leaned in quietly, captivated by the interplay of the two pianists. The children were fascinated, pointing at small hand movements and whispering to each other. Adults watched with quiet appreciation, recognizing the beauty of the teaching and learning process. She felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that her efforts could inspire someone else, even strangers. In a way she had not expected, the older man spoke sparingly, letting her find her own way, only stepping in when necessary. "Feel the music," he said at one point, his voice gentle. "Do not think too much. Let it flow through you." She realized that he was not just teaching her notes or techniques. He was teaching her patience, awareness, and emotional honesty. Music, she learned, was not just about playing the right keys. It was about being present, connecting with the instrument, and expressing what she felt inside. She played a simple melody he had suggested, repeating it several times, exploring slight variations each time. The way the sound shifted with minor adjustments amazed her. She felt an inner satisfaction, a sense of growth that went beyond the music. She realized that learning was not about perfection, but about understanding, experimentation, and allowing herself to be vulnerable. Every mistake became an opportunity. Every challenge, a chance to discover something new. Time seemed to slip away as they played together. She found herself fully immersed, her mind completely engaged in the music and the guidance she received. The older man occasionally shared short stories, moments from his own life as a musician, illustrating lessons with personal anecdotes. She listened intently, absorbing not just technique, but philosophy, understanding that the life of a musician was intertwined with dedication, patience, and love for the craft. Her confidence grew with each session, subtle but noticeable. She noticed her hands moving more fluidly, her fingers finding keys with intention and expression. The older man smiled at small improvements, offering encouragement with quiet words or a nod. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, realizing that her initial fear of imperfection was slowly being replaced with curiosity and determination. She was learning more than she had imagined, not just about music, but about herself. The public space around them faded into the background. Though people still watched, she was no longer conscious of the crowd. Her focus was entirely on the piano, the sound she created, and the connection she shared with her mentor. The music became a conversation, a collaboration that transcended words. She felt alive, exhilarated, and deeply fulfilled. Each note played was a small victory, each sequence an achievement, a reflection of her growing understanding and capability. He encouraged her to create her own melody. Using the techniques and concepts they had explored, she hesitated at first, unsure of what to produce. But as she placed her fingers on the keys and let intuition guide her, a simple tune emerged. It was not perfect, but it had heart, emotion, and sincerity. He listened silently, then nodded approvingly. "You see? That is yours. That is music," he said. She smiled, a rush of pride and relief washing over her. She understood, for the first time, that music was personal, unique, and a reflection of who she was in that moment. They continued, alternating between exercises, guided improvisations, and simple compositions. The older man encouraged her to experiment with dynamics, touch, and timing. She learned how to make the music feel alive, how to make each note count, how to breathe life into melodies that would otherwise be lifeless. She began to see the piano not as an instrument, but as a partner, responding to her intentions and emotions. It was a dialogue, a partnership between her hands, her mind, and the instrument itself. The older man shared insights about expression, telling her to play from the heart, not just the head. She understood that emotion could make even a simple tune extraordinary. She experimented, letting her feelings shape the music, allowing joy, hesitation, curiosity, and wonder to influence each note. She realized that mistakes were part of the journey, that imperfections could create beauty, and that true mastery was not just skill, but authenticity. Her confidence deepened, and her music began to reflect her personality in subtle, powerful ways. The crowd remained captivated by the exchange between teacher and student. Children pointed out subtle changes, adults whispered in quiet amazement, and strangers nodded at each other, sharing a sense of witnessing something special. She felt honored to be part of this moment, understanding that music could touch people in ways beyond words. Her playful beginning had evolved into a meaningful experience, one that had transformed her perspective and opened her mind to new possibilities. She continued to practice under his guidance, exploring different textures, rhythms, and melodic ideas. Each attempt brought a new understanding, a deeper connection with the piano, and a greater sense of accomplishment. She felt that she was discovering layers of herself she had never known existed, and that the piano had become a gateway to something far larger than she had imagined. Her mentor's patience and wisdom guided her gently, allowing her to grow at her own pace while challenging her to push boundaries as the lesson went on. She began to sense her own progress, subtle yet significant. The melodies she created were becoming richer, more expressive, more her own. She felt the thrill of creation, the excitement of learning, and the deep satisfaction of understanding that her talent was not just a fleeting moment, but something to nurture and develop. The older man's presence, calm and steady, inspired confidence and courage, teaching her that growth came from dedication, curiosity, and openness to new experiences. By the end of their time together, she felt transformed. The piano was no longer a toy, no longer just a game. It had become a medium for self-expression, a companion that reflected her emotions and thoughts, a partner in the journey of discovery. She realized that this encounter had changed her perspective, opened her eyes to possibilities she had never imagined, and ignited a passion she could no longer ignore. The playful game of the morning had blossomed into a meaningful exploration of music, emotion, and personal growth, a memory she would carry forever. The experience with the piano legend stayed with her long after she left that open public space. She walked home slowly, replaying every note, every subtle instruction, and every feeling she had encountered during their time together. Her heart was full, her mind buzzing with new ideas. And for the first time, she understood the power of music not just as sound, but as expression, connection, and personal discovery. The casual game she had started with had grown into a moment of profound change, and she knew her life would never be quite the same. She arrived home and could not wait to sit at her own piano. It was smaller, older, and not as well-tuned, but it was hers. She remembered the lessons, the small tips, the emphasis on feeling, and she started experimenting. Her fingers moved differently now, more aware, more intentional. She tried to recreate the sequences the legend had shown her, feeling them in a way she had never before. Each note carried meaning, each pause had weight, and she could sense the growing depth of expression she had been missing before. Days turned into weeks, and she continued to practice, not out of obligation, but out of excitement. She explored melodies, rhythms, and harmonies with a curiosity that seemed endless. Every day, she discovered something new, some subtle aspect of music or emotion she had not understood. Her confidence grew with each attempt, and the playful joy of music returned, now enriched with purpose and skill. It was as if the game had evolved into a journey, one with endless possibilities. Each step building on the last, she reflected on the legend's guidance, remembering the gentle corrections, the encouragement, and the emphasis on emotion over perfection. She realized that the lessons extended beyond the piano, touching aspects of life itself. patience, observation, experimentation. And embracing mistakes were not just musical concepts. They were principles she could apply everywhere. The encounter had shown her the value of mentorship, the impact of kind and thoughtful guidance, and the importance of believing in potential even before it was fully realized. Friends and family began to notice the change in her. She carried herself differently, with a quiet confidence and an unusual spark of enthusiasm. She spoke about her discoveries with excitement, sharing what she had learned about music and the emotions it could convey. People were intrigued, drawn to her passion, and she felt a growing sense of purpose. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a vehicle for growth, connection, and self-expression. One evening, she returned to the public space where it all had begun. The piano sat there as it always did, waiting, and she approached it with a sense of reverence. She pressed the keys gently, remembering the sequences, the guidance, and the thrill of discovery. She played slowly at first, then allowed herself to explore freely, letting her fingers move naturally and her emotions flow through the music. Passers-by stopped, drawn to the sound, some smiling, some pausing to listen. She realized that the cycle had come full circle. What had begun as a playful game was now an opportunity to inspire others. Her journey continued as she sought out opportunities to learn more, attending classes, workshops, and small performances. The foundation laid by her chance meeting with the piano legend became the cornerstone of her musical growth. She developed a routine, balancing practice, exploration, and personal expression, always remembering the importance of feeling over technique. Each day brought new discoveries, small victories, and a growing understanding of her own potential. The legend occasionally appeared in her thoughts, a silent guide reminding her to play from the heart, to listen deeply, and to embrace mistakes as part of growth. She imagined his calm presence beside her, guiding her fingers, nodding in approval, and encouraging her to experiment. These imagined lessons became a source of strength and inspiration, helping her push boundaries and explore her abilities without fear. She began to compose small pieces of music, simple yet expressive. Reflecting her journey and personal growth, her confidence on the piano gradually transformed into confidence in life. She approached challenges with curiosity rather than fear, embraced opportunities for learning, and valued guidance and mentorship in all aspects. The simple game she had played that day had taught her lessons far beyond the piano, showing her the power of exploration, courage, and connection. She understood that growth often came unexpectedly, through small, seemingly casual experiences that carried profound meaning months later. She returned once more to the public piano, this time inviting a few friends to join her. She played for them, demonstrating the melodies and techniques she had learned, and watched as they smiled, listened, and even tried their own hands at the keys. She realized that the joy she had found could be shared, multiplied, and passed on. The game had turned into a journey, the journey into a lesson, and the lesson into inspiration for others. She continued to pursue her musical path with determination, always remembering that first encounter with the legend. That day had transformed her understanding, shifted her perspective, opened a door to possibilities she had never imagined. Music had become a constant companion, a source of joy, growth, and connection. The casual game that had started so innocently had blossomed into a lifelong passion, shaping her identity, her confidence, and her understanding of the world around her. In her mind, she often replayed the day she had met the legend. She remembered the way he had observed quietly, the gentle guidance, the emphasis on feeling rather than perfection. She remembered the thrill of discovery, the small victories, the growing awareness of her potential. That memory remained a source of inspiration, a reminder that sometimes the most profound moments come from the simplest beginnings. A game had become a turning point, and that turning point had set her on a path she would follow for the rest of her life.